I was known to be a bulldog, and I'm very proud of that fact. I chased many people down streets. I banged on many doors after people said to go away. I was out to get the story, and no one was going to tell me no.
It's said that if you stop being curious, you stop growing. I'm David Wiley. This is Dave Wants to Know. Welcome back, everyone, to Dave Wants to Know. I am your host, Dave, and we are actually joined by another Dave who had a legendary career in Los Angeles news. Dave Lopez, 48 years as a TV reporter, 43 of those years at the same station, which is hard to even imagine these days. Dave Lopez joins us. Welcome.
Well, thank you. It's nice to be here.
Dave, 43 years at one station. So I was in the news business. The longest I ever went was 13 years before management said it's time to make some budget cuts. How did you do it?
Well, I mean, a luck's involved, and of course you have to produce. I mean, this is one business where if at least when I was in it, I don't know if it's as rough as it is was back then, but I mean, if you didn't produce, you were gone. I mean, they didn't care if you had a 3-year contract, 4-year contract, whatever. If you stopped producing and you had no use to them, you were out of there. So I was very fortunate. I mean, I knew what I had to do. I always went the extra mile. I never complained about long hours. I always wanted to get that extra interview, that extra item in my stories. And I was just a hard worker. I mean, it was something I learned very early in life. And I had a ball. I mean, I never really went to work saying, oh, God, I got to go to this, I got to do that. I was very blessed. I did exactly in my life what I planned to do ever since I was in the 5th grade.
So, yeah, that brings up, you started journalism, at Southgate High School, starting the newspaper?
Yeah, that's correct. I was raised in Southgate, a beautiful little city. I'm the oldest of 8 children. I talk a lot about my family life in my book. It's called It's a Great Life If You Don't Weaken Family Faith in 48 Years on Television. And it's done very well. I'm very pleased with the way it came out. And I explain a lot about my upbringing. And I have to give all the credit to my mom and father, my mom and dad. I mean, they immigrants from Mexico, hardworking people. My dad had a very successful business. My mom was just a saint. And they taught us the no shortcuts. The only way to be successful is to work hard, create goals for yourself, and reach those goals. And if you don't be afraid of picking yourself up and going again. So at a very young age, I knew that I wanted to be a journalist. Just something that I loved it. I mean, I can remember watching all the newscasts when it was a 15-minute broadcast on CBS. I was a paper boy, and a lot of times I'd be late on my route because I was busy reading the Herald Examiner and all the stuff that was going on in the world. I was just very inquisitive. So when I was 16 years old, I got a job at the old Southgate Press. It was a throwaway. Thursdays and Sundays it came out, and I covered the Parks program. And then from there, I got hired by a very wonderful man named Willis Arrington, who was the sports editor of the Huntington Park Daily Signal. Came out 6 days a week, circulation of about 25,000. So it was a good-sized paper. And I started writing for that newspaper. And but all the time, my goal was to get into television one day. And in 1971, I had just been married for a little over a year. And I got a job at a cable station, 3M Communication. It was Channel 8 in Long Beach. Walked in, said, can you use a guy that can do news? And they go, how much television experience? I said, oh, man, do I have TV experience? My television experience up to that time was one class at LA State, a broken down, dilapidated camera. I got in, I think it worked for 30 seconds before it fizzled out. And that was my TV experience. But as a kid, I used to practice all the time. I mean, I look in the mirror, anything that I had in my hand was my microphone. When I started driving, I'd drive by and I'd see something and I'd imagine there was a story and I'd start talking. People must have looked at me like I was crazy talking to myself all the time. So I parlayed everything that I knew. I had a lot of confidence, and I got a job at Channel 9 at the age of 24, and I never looked back.
That's unbelievable. At age 24, you're working in the second largest market in the country?
I was very lucky. I never went to Poughkeepsie, Illinois. Armpit, Georgia. I never did any of that stuff.
Barstow,
Uh,
California. Yeah.
Barstow, California. I was very, very lucky. I was working for the newspaper, and I became the sports editor, and I covered all of the big events. I mean, I had a man who didn't want the job, and so I basically got it because he didn't want it. Cliff Kowicki, terrific, terrific writer, and I learned very much from him. And I think one of the keys to my success in this business was the fact that I was in print journalism because it taught you how to write. The who, what, when, where, and why, something that is forgotten in today's society. But I learned from the best. I really did. And I remember, I write about it in my book, but I had a chance to interview at Channel 9. I made a phone call on a whim, talked to a guy named Fernando Del Rio. And in fact, I'll tell you, I'll make it real quick. Fraser the Lion. Remember Fraser the Lion, the
Yeah.
famous
Yeah.
lion at Lion Country Safari? Well, he had died this one particular day. And I'm sitting home. It was a Tuesday. I'm sitting at home from my newspaper days and the cable. And Fernando Del Rio comes on the air, and he says that, the very, very crude kind of TV coverage. He walks in, has a little UPI wire service in his hand, and he reads on the air that Fraser the Lion, quote, Fraser the Lion succumbed to death today in Lion Country Safari. And so Stan Borman was the anchor, and he starts chuckling. Succumb, huh? You mean he died? And I said to myself, I think I can do that. I really do. I know to pronounce succumb, not succumb. So I called Fernando just out of the blue, got to the phone, called him up and said, hey, Mr. Fernando Del Rio, I'm Dave Lopez. I'm a young reporter. I'd love to be able to get on television. You have time for me? And he did. The next day, we had a great interview. He said they were looking for somebody at the newsroom. I was introduced to the news director, Bob Brady. He said, hey, you want to audition? I said, sure, I want to audition. So the following week, I took off at the newspaper, worked 5 days at Channel 9 as a reporter. That Friday, he called me in. He says, you got a job. And that's how my 48-year run in television began. Fernando's still alive. God bless him. He's 97. He still denies that he said suck him. But I said, Fernando, I wouldn't have called you if you didn't say suck him.
Stan Borman. Now, that's a name that goes back. I actually interned when I was at Cal State Northridge when he was doing talk radio at that point, and I interned on his show. What about Pete Noyes? Because that's another person that I think you and I maybe have some similarities. Pete Noyes was kind of the inspiration for Lou Grant, they say, and he was part of your early career.
Yeah, Pete, and I write extensively about Pete in my book. My book's on Amazon, if you don't mind me plugging that. So Amazon, you can get it. And I'm very happy to say that I won the award for best audio book that year, a couple of years ago, and also runner-up in the best autobiography of a Hispanic writer. So it's done very well. And I write about Pete, one full chapter about him. Pete Noyes was the greatest journalist I ever knew. He was never on television. He was never on radio. Pete was a behind-the-scenes guy. He worked for the just about everybody you can imagine. And Pete knew how to do a television story. I'd gotten tired of working at Channel 9. I said, I'm out of here, and I quit. And my wife was pregnant with our second child at the time. And someone said, you got to call Pete Noyes. He's at the time, Pete was in San Diego. He was a news director at KFMB. I called him up out of the blue. He took my phone call. He knew who I was. And he said, come on down. I want to talk to you. So I drove down to San Diego, and he hired me on the spot. But he said, on one condition, you're not going to do sports. I was doing a lot of sports back in those days. And he said, I'm going to make a newsman out of you. And I reluctantly said, well, okay. I mean, I need a job, but and I heard that you're one of the best in the business, and I'll listen and I'll learn from you. And he changed my career. He really did. He taught me how to be a newsman. He taught me how to do things right. One of the things that when I look at reporters today, I always think of Pete. Pete had a real gruff voice. Oh, yeah, you got to do this right. You got to do that. No excuses. You have a heart attack. You make sure you got your story on time. That kind of stuff. Pete was he was a gem. And Pete used to always tell us, you're being invited into people's homes. You're reporting, but you're in their homes. Dress like it. Suit and tie. Unless it's a fire, a flood, or something that's really dramatic. But I want you to look sharp. And I always learned that lesson. The only time I never appeared on camera without a shirt and tie on, this is, talking about shirt and tie. I don't have one on today, but on television, it was either a fire or a flood. Pete knew how to tell a story, and I learned from him. And he mentored so many great people. Pete died at the age of 91. He was just a wonderful, wonderful man. And I say this as I'm sitting here, without Pete Noyes, there's no Dave Lopez in this business. That's simple.
Interesting. Yeah, I had him as an instructor at Cal State Northridge, and I had no idea who I was, taking classes from. But I've learned over the years, kind of one of those.
And let me tell you a quick funny story about Pete. Pete had a temper, and if he didn't like something, he would tell you. Pete was the producer of the big news back in the 60s at Channel 2 when they had Jerry Dunphy and all the big names. I mean, they got buku ratings. I mean, their ratings were 4 times greater than anybody else. I mean, it was the news. And Pete was the producer. One day, Jerry Dunphy comes in and he doesn't like a script. Who wrote this script? Who wrote this script? And Pete says, I did. You got a problem with it? And Dunphy, according to the story, ripped it up. And Pete got furious. And he challenged Dunphy and he took a swing at him. And he missed. A big fight. They sent Pete home, blah, blah, blah. So the next day, Pete expects to be fired. General manager calls him up, goes into the office, and he says, heard about what happened last night, Noyes? Yeah, I lost my temper, blah, 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 blah. And then Pete says the general manager gets up and tells him, Pete, if you ever take a swing at Dunphy again and you miss the son of a bitch, then I'll fire you. Now get out of here. Pete loved to tell that story.
I bet. Was Jerry Dunphy one of those guys that he was well known and popular on the air, but maybe behind the scenes?
Well, in the Mary Tyler Moore show, the anchor played by
Ted Baxter, yeah.
Ted, yeah. Well, that supposedly, and Dunphy used to hate it, but that was supposedly the based on Jerry Dunphy. I never worked with Dunphy that long. He came back to Channel 9 very late in his career, Channel 2 very late in his career. I didn't know him that well. He was always very friendly to me the times that I met him. But I'm told that he could be, he could be pretty rough. He could be pretty tough. I'll tell you one other quick story about Dunphy. From the desert to the sea to all of Southern California, good evening. This is Jerry Dunphy. This is the news. Someone told me that one time they were going to change it. He'd been doing this for years, from the desert to the sea to all of Southern California. Good evening. I'm Jerry Dunphy. Well, somebody ran the prompter. In those days, it was, manually done. And they said, look, I bet you a bottle of wine, if I take one word out, I'm going to take desert out. I bet he's going to follow it up. What? He'll mess it up. What? No way. So sure enough, he takes the word desert out. The show begins, Hi, everybody. From the.
So he was Ted Baxter.
He couldn't get past desert.
So you start in the early 70s, and do you consider yourself a pioneer? I mean, there were not a lot of Latino reporters, on the air, doing, reporting. You were doing serious reporting, Vietnam protests, whatever was happening in the Los Angeles area, you were covering. Mm-hmm. You're one of the first, if not the first.
Well, I mean, they had, I think you can count on one hand the number of Hispanic reporters on the air in 1972. This is, I keep telling people, well, when did you start? I said, well, I started in April. It was April 12th, 1972. And George McGovern. And people say, who? I said, George McGovern, he ran for president. Wait, who? Yeah. George McGovern was in town. He was campaigning, running for the Democratic Party. And I was assigned a story. That was my very first story I covered. I mean, that's how far back I go. And, but no, there were very, very few Hispanics at the time. But you know what? I never looked at it that way. At Channel 9, I never had a problem. I did sports. I did, news. I did weather. I did everything at Channel 9. I worked with George Putnam, one of the great names in Southern California business. I worked with, you name all the top anchors, and I did. Hal Fishman was another one. Fishman used to always look at me, and he'd look at me and he'd go like, you go, "Hey, Dave, is the rug on straight? Is the rug on straight?" I go,
No.
I said, "Hal, it looks great. It looks great." George Putnam was the only anchor I ever worked with who actually warmed up his voice. I mean, he would go in his office and you can hear him like an engine. He was brilliant. George was terrific with me. I was very, very lucky to work for those people. When I went to Channel 2, I got hired. I spent only 9 months in San Diego. And Pete called me in one day and he says, "Hey, Channel 2 is looking for a reporter. And they need a Latino reporter." Back in those days, you had a quota to fill. Everybody knew it. But again, if you didn't make it, if you weren't good enough, out you go. Black, brown, blue, whatever you were, didn't matter. You had to produce. And Pete said, "They're looking for you. You fit the bill perfectly." I said, "Pete, I love it here. I love working with you." He said, "No, no, no." He says, "Your future's in LA. I'm not here in San Diego. San Diego's too limited. Go to LA." So I did. And I got hired. Got hired on, right away, 1977, June 12th. For the 12th of the month seems to be kind of a lucky number for me. June 12th, 1977, I got hired at Channel 2 as a field reporter. And I got tossed into it right away. I mean, I was doing a number of different stories. And then there was one of the executive producers thought that I should just do Hispanic stories. Being Lopez, that was it. And so for a while there, I was stuck just doing it. It didn't last very long, for maybe about 3 weeks. And then what happened one day, 3 kids were walking down a railroad track in Cudahy. Cudahy, to those who lived in that area, they called it Billy Goat Town. And it was mostly people that came from Oklahoma and, different parts. It was mostly white. But this producer who was from out of town thought that it was mostly Hispanic kids. So he thought there were 3 Hispanic kids walking down the railroad tracks and they all got hit. They were playing chicken with a train. So I get down there and I did a live shot, and it wasn't Hispanic kids. It was 3 white kids. And I was very good at ad-libbing. I never had a problem ad-libbing or what have you, and I did a bang enough job to be called the next day into the office and said, "Hey, you're anytime there's a live shot, you're going to be called out there." So there goes the the Dave Lopez sticking with nothing but Hispanic stories. But you know what? I never experienced prejudice directly. I'm sure there was. It was a tough way. I mean, it was a tough business. We were watched carefully to make sure that we could do the job. And I can't emphasize enough. I know I'm repeating myself, but back in those days, in the late 70s, early 80s, there were a lot of good reporters that I worked with that for some reason or another didn't make it. Something might have happened. They got ticked off. They might have missed a slot. And that's what Pete told me. Pete taught me the most important. It's no good to do a bang up story and miss your slot. If you're supposed to be on at 5:01, you better make damn sure you make it 5:01. It can't be 5:01:10. It's got to be right at the time. And that's what I strive to do all the time. I don't think in all my career I ever missed a slot that was my fault. With my technical difficulties sometimes,
Right.
but not because I wasn't ready to do a story. But I never looked at myself as a Hispanic reporter. I never looked at myself as a pioneer. I mean, I know I was, but I never had that in mind. I was Dave Lopez, a reporter.
How would you describe your reporting style? Because when I kind of was looking into your background, and obviously I watched you for many, many years, the description I get is you're very personable and people can relate to you, but you also don't take no comment for an answer. So that's kind of,
I was known to be a bulldog, and I'm very proud of that fact. I chased many, many people down streets. I banged on many, many doors after people said to go away. I was out to get the story, and no one was going to tell me no. That was that simple. There were times when a police chief of a certain town wouldn't talk to me, and I found out that he went to lunch at a certain place. And me and my cameraman there was a bush that was just perfect. We could hide. And the minute he was walking down that sidewalk, boom, guess who popped out in front of the bush with the camera crew? I chased
wow.
Frank McCourt. Chased Frank McCourt out of the courthouse one time, and his ride got stuck at a red light, and I'm sitting there just peppering him with questions left and right. I never took no for an answer. And there were many, many times when people would say, "Hey, here comes Lopez. Don't we're not going to talk to him, or hell, you got this way back way." So when COVID hit, and they started saying, "Well, you can't talk to so and so because COVID, and go on the Zoom, go on this," the decision to retire. I was 72 at the time, and I'd been already in the business for 48 years. So it made it a lot easier to decide that, maybe we should wind this down. I would never have been a reporter today that would have been able to interview people strictly on Zoom. I mean, I had to be there. You had to be in your face. You had to be there. During COVID, once time when if I didn't get called on during the news conference, I found out where Dr. Farrar parked her car, and I would be there, 6 feet away, but I would be right there with the camera crew. It's just the way I was. I knew people at home wanted the real story, and I was never afraid to ask the tough question. And if I didn't get the answer I liked, I just kept peppering.
So you said your first story was George McGovern visiting LA. You've seen a lot over the years in LA. Are there a few stories that stand out more than others that just, I mean, the OJ trial or the wildfires, the LA riots, any of those things that stand out to you as like this was when journalism was journalism and we were out there really pounding the pavement.
Well, I mean, I covered so many stories. I mean, name every story that happened in LA from 1972 until 2020. Every major story that happened, I covered it. I mean, I was there. I mean, I went to Somalia when the Marines were going to try to keep the Somalis from being starved to death. I covered plane crashes. I covered earthquakes. I covered floods. I covered massive wildfires. I spent, you know, OJ was especially, one of the real major stories that I covered every day. They took me in from Los Angeles, and I mean from Orange County, and put me into Los Angeles specifically for that case. A couple of sheriffs got in big trouble over stories that I did. Heidel was the name of an undersheriff who had a kid that got involved in a very, very horrific crime against a young lady. I covered that story, found out there was some cover-ups, and the sheriff at the time, Mike Corona, wound up going to prison based on a lot of stories that we covered. Uh, I did the Hillside, I did the Hillside Strangler. I did the probably the one that really put me on the map was the Freeway Killer, William Bonin, who actually confessed to me, and I wound up testifying against him. It made headlines in the story, what have you. I chronicle all this in my book, but that one probably was the one that put me on the map. I I had a decision to make. We made a deal. My father said you can't make a deal with the devil, and William Bonin was a notorious murderer. He was convicted of killing 14 young boys, all hitchhiking, and he confessed to me that he killed 26. He was executed, first man killed in California, executed in California, lethal injection. But I covered them all. The stories that really affected me the most, though, were the ones when little kids were involved. There was a kidnapping, Amy Sue Seitz. I'll never forget her. She was 2 years old when she was kidnapped by a guy named Theodore Frank. And God, some of the stories, you interview women who lost their babies, you interview mothers who lost their children and what have you. Covered a story one time. There was a nice young kid walking in the middle of Watts. He had on a red shirt and a red backpack, and someone came up to him and said, "What gang are you with?" And he says, "I'm not with a gang," and they shot him in the head. And that kind of stuff. It's a killer. One of the, but you try to people. I know how cops feel and firefighters feel because they see things that very few people see. And but I had a marvelous wife. I lost her after 43 years of marriage. She passed away, and never dreamed I'd get remarried and I'd have another wonderful woman. My daughter always teases me. Said, "Father, I don't know how you got one woman to marry you. Now you have two." You know, but I've tried to be the kind of guy that was compassionate and understanding and not mean. I mean, I don't think I was ever, I may have come across mean on some interviews I may have done, but that wasn't the intention. But again, it all goes back to the way I was raised. I was raised with a marvelous mother, a father who was extremely difficult to deal with, but who was fair. And it affected me my entire life.
I'm interested in, I think one of the amazing things about your stories, there's a lot of amazing things. Obviously, you won a lot of awards for your reporting as well, but the longevity, I can kind of come back to that. I think I saw you worked under 22 different news directors, 24 station managers at Channel 2 alone.
Yeah.
And you somehow survived all that. What,
Well, yeah, I did.
what did you have? What was your magic juice, Dave?
Well, number one, when I got hired at Channel 2, after a year, they put me out in Orange County. And I remember I went out there kicking and screaming, saying, I'm never going to get on the air. I don't want to do that. And I was told by Jonathan Rogers, who was the news director at the time, it's going to work. It's going to work. You're the perfect guy for it, blah, blah, blah. And so I didn't go into the station a lot because I was out in the field. When I got transferred back up to LA, the same thing. I took the job only if I could still work it like I worked the Orange County Bureau. During OJ, I never went into the station. And I made it a point to stay out of politics. And again, you go back to Pete Noyes. Pete said, look, there's going to be a lot of politics in this business, and stay out of it. On his advice, I hired an agent very early in my career. I had an agent since the first year that I got into the business, and he handled everything. I mean, he did everything. I trusted him to no end. And a lot of guys didn't want to because, pay him 6% of your salary. They go, oh, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. But it saved me. There were times when I would get very upset and very angry and what have you, but I never let that happen. I saw too many guys go into the station angry at a meeting that was supposed to be a nice, calm meeting, and they wind up getting canned. And so I just stayed away from that. But the bottom line was, and again, it's what Pete taught me, report, do the story. Be like that light switch. You turn on the light switch, you expect the lights to go on. That's what I did. They could call me at any time, day or night, and I'd cover the story, and I'd do the story, and I'd get the story on the air. And I think management realized that and knew that. And I treated people fairly. I really did. I mean, I treated my camera crew. Without my camera crew, you couldn't get the job done. And all this was the foundation that Pete laid for me. There was a wonderful, wonderful reporter very early in my career. His name was Bob Dunn. His son became a cameraman for us, and he was an excellent cameraman for years and years. But I remember Bob calls me. I couldn't have been at the station for more than 2 months. And Bob called me in. He says, hey, come here. You got time? Let me buy you a cup of coffee down in the commissary. And so we just started chit-chatting. And Bob was a veteran. Bob had been at the station for quite a number of years and well-respected. And he told me, he says, look, let me give you some advice. He says, you got talent. You got talent, and you're going to be good. But just remember this. There's a lot of people in this business that have talent, and they're very good. But eventually the station will get tired of them because of their antics and their attitude and the way they talk to other people. Don't do that. Be a nice guy. If you're going to be a jerk, you use another word besides jerk, but he said, if you're going to be a jerk, make sure you are so good that you're going to last a while, but know full well you'll get fired. Or you can be a very nice guy and somewhat humble, even though it's hard to be humble in this business, but try to do that. There's a fine line, and you'll last. And I'll always remember that. Bob was a wonderful man. He was a terrific guy. He ultimately left the station, had a big hassle with him. But, I always let my agent handle everything. I never talked to management about money. I never talked to management about a contract. It was all my agent, and I'm glad I did. I had him for 44 of the 48 years I was in the business.
Wow. Yeah. Because those interactions about money or things like that can often don't go well. So if you have an intermediator, but what Bob Dunn was saying about, just being nice, I mean, that's really almost any job. If you're good at it, they'll put up with some stuff, but after a while, they're going to get tired of it. And again, your longevity shows they didn't get tired of it.
Well, we had a guy at our station who he was a brilliant reporter, but he always missed his slot. I mean, he would be always late. And finally, the station couldn't take it anymore, and they let him go, And there's so many things. The number one rule, today reporting is much different today. I didn't have to carry a camera. I would have never carried a camera. I'm a reporter. That's what I do. A cameraman's a cameraman. But in today's reporters, I think, have lost sight of the fact that they're not the show. Too many people want to. I mean, I've seen so many reporters sitting in the truck waiting to go on the air, and they got their makeup on, and they got their hair ready. I mean, if my hair was off, it looked bad. It looked bad. So what? The main thing was for me to tell the story and get the job done and do it right. Get it right. You don't want to have to do any retractions later on. But if I give advice to anyone who wants to be in this field, learn to write, learn to tell a story succinctly, and always, always treat whoever you're dealing with courtesy. You go a long ways if you do that.
Is journalism still a viable career path?
It's tough. It's getting tougher and tougher because of the people that are running the organization. It's hard for me now. I mean, my wife gets mad at me every time I watch TV because I'm constantly flipping or whatever. I mean, they've forgotten the nuts and bolts of it, the who, what, when, where, and why, and the stories that they cover today. I mean, I still think there's going to be a place for journalism. I think at some point people are going to always want to turn to the TV if something major happens and want to find out. I mean, it's a tough, tough time right now. I mean, we've never lived in times like this. I just know that I might have been banned from news conferences today because of the kind of questions that I would have asked. I would not have taken the answers that they're getting today, and I certainly would not have tolerated. I heard there are some times when reporters aren't even allowed in certain news conferences because they don't want to have any questions for the mayor or the governor or whatever. I wouldn't have stood for that. But it's changed. You have to change for the with the times, but I just wish someone would pipe up and just say, hey, wait a minute, I'm not leaving here until I get the answer to this question, yes or no, that kind of stuff. But you don't hear that very much anymore.
So being in Los Angeles and Southern California, I'm sure you had opportunity to run across a lot of famous people, not just local electeds or whatever, but celebrities or well-known people. Do you have a favorite encounter, and were you ever starstruck by anybody?
Well, I think the only time that I was ever in awe was when I interviewed Billy Graham. I mean, this man was something. I mean, he really personified what he was. I was very lucky enough to be in the presence of the Pope when he named Father Sarah a saint. I was like, 20 yards away. That was quite a moment. But to be starstruck, no, I don't think I was really starstruck. I mean, impressed, sure. But you can't see. That's the other thing that gets me is I don't remember ever doing an interview with anybody of great importance and not and being afraid to ask a tough question. I mean, I treated everyone equally. I remember one time during the riots, the Rodney King riots, there was a city council member there watching his car being burned. And I tried to get an interview with him, and he looked at me and says, I don't want to talk to you. And I looked at him and I said, you know what? I really don't want to talk to you either. And so we walked away.
That's great.
But no, I mean, the OJ case really taught me what could happen when people are starstruck. I mean, Judge Ito, if ever there was a judge who really lost control of his courtroom, I mean, that was the case there. I remember one time there was a big rumor that the case was going to be settled. And oh my God, it always started at 1:30 after lunch, and at 1:30, nobody, 1:45, no, nothing, 1:50, nothing, 2:00, nothing. Finally, 2:15, Ito's, the door in the hallway opened up and Larry King walked out. He'd been talking to Larry King. So there was no settlement talk. He was just talking to Larry King. But, I've been blessed to have seen things that people would never see. I go I go so far back that when I was a young reporter at the Huntington Park Signal, I'll always remember this. Cliff Gawicki, my boss, called me up and he said, "Hey, this is 1967," and he says to me, "USC has this new kid. He's a transfer student, and he goes by OJ, initials OJ. And I got an interview with him. Cliff used to work for Sport Magazine." You want to come along? And I remember riding with him and met OJ, his wife. He had a little baby girl right off of Adams at a little apartment somewhere. Nicest guy you ever want to meet. The nicest guy you can be. And throughout his years at USC, I covered when he played for Buffalo. I got to cover pro football and different sporting events. And even after he retired, I would see him at the Ritz Carlton Hotel a lot. His father-in-law had an agency, a rental car agency, and I'd take my kids there before school started. And he was always friendly to me. And so when this happened, when this murder happened, I couldn't believe that this was the same. It wasn't the OJ that I had known. Let's put it that way. And it was amazing. I had a real good friendship with Johnny Cochran. I had a real good friendship with the Reverend Schuler. When Reverend Schuler, God bless his soul, when he opened up his Crystal Cathedral, I'll never forget. In the elevator, we're riding up, and he nudges me in the ribs. He says, "Hey, Dave, what do you think of my glass shack?" What do you say?
That's
So
funny.
like I said, I've been very lucky, and it's been a hell of a ride. It really has.
What about people maybe you bumped heads with? Was there somebody that whether a newsmaker or a coworker that just you guys weren't on the same plane or just couldn't make it work?
I'm sure that there were a lot of people that didn't want to talk to me, but I never really had a tough situation where I had to be away from someone. I mean, I'm sure Mike Corona doesn't welcome me with open arms or think highly of me, and even to some degree, Sheriff Lee Baca, the same thing. But no, I never really had a problem. And as far as reporters go, I mean, there was competition, but I don't think there was any real animosity or a place where you had to stay away. I mean, I know Frank McCourt would not think highly of me. If you asked Frank McCourt to say something about me, I don't think that would be, I would get a very decent statement. Tommy Lasorda could have been really tough on people, but Tommy and I got along very, very well. Walter Alston and I got along very, very well. It's the same thing.
It's going
I
way
was,
back.
I was very lucky, extremely lucky. But no, I don't, I mean, I'm sure that I made people angry. And I'm sure people might have said something behind my back. But, I learned a long time ago, and again, it goes all the way back to my father, the way we were raised. Um, if you're happy with yourself, who cares what other people think? I mean, you can't change. You can't change things. And I once interviewed uh, Nolan Lloyd, the actor. He lived to be 106. He was on St. Elsewhere and a bunch of other stuff.
Okay.
And I was in City Hall one day, and I covered another story, and I heard all this commotion from the press room, and I looked inside. And there was this dapper-looking gentleman standing at the podium, wearing a suit, tie, with cane, and he was being honored on his 100th birthday, and it was Lloyd Nolan. And I interviewed him, and I asked him. I said, I hate it. I've interviewed a lot of people that got either were 100 or close to 100, and of course, you always get, I don't want to ask you the trite question. Well, what do you do to live so long? Blah 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 blah. I said, look. I said, what is your secret? You have a secret. And he told me, I'll never forget him. He says, you have to be lucky. You have to live a good, solid life. You have to laugh at yourself at times. But he said the most important thing I learned is that you just stay away from people that piss you off, and you avoid the aggravation. And he made it to 106, so something must have worked.
I think you mentioned it. Maybe it was in your book that the only major story you missed during your career was the Dorner.
Yeah, Christopher Dorner, the
Christopher
cop
Dorner.
That went,
yeah, the sheriff, the former sheriff that kind of went nuts, and
Yeah.
But that was for a very good reason. You were taking care of your wife.
Yeah. My wife got very ill. She had a lung disorder, and she got sick on February 1st of 2013. And that's when Dorner had, he for those who don't remember the story, he was a wayward LAPD officer, and he had gotten fired, and he was going to get even with anybody who did him wrong. And he started out with a killing of the daughter of a LAPD officer who was supposed to defend him in a trial and did a lousy job. Then he started killing off all kinds of people, and it was he had the city really
Ended up in Big
turmoil,
Bear,
terrible.
yeah,
He wound up being killed up in Big Bear.
yeah.
But my wife was in the hospital. She was in intensive care, and 73 days, and I couldn't leave her side. I just couldn't. And we battled, and she ultimately lost that battle. She died in August of 2013, and I nearly quit after that. I was gonna quit, retire when she got sick, and excuse me, my daughter talked me out of it. And then the same thing after she passed away. But I'm glad I didn't. A very wise man told me that you don't die with your spouse. You have to go on, and that's what I did. So, but that's the only major story that I ever missed. And I realized I covered everything else, and I would be the first to want to jump out of bed and cover a big story, and no questions asked. It was a big story. I wanted to be there. So what happened was I just come back from a very nice trip to Southeast Asia, and I'm trying to catch up on my sleep. And that was the night that Kobe got killed in a helicopter crash. And I knew I was going to get a call, but I was tired. I didn't want to drive way in the hell out to the area where the chopper wreckage was. And that's when I realized that the spark that I always had, the desire, was waning. And that's when I really started thinking about calling it quits. And that was the real pinnacle that boosted me to retire when I did.
For people who don't know what a report, because we just see you on the air for a couple of minutes for your report, maybe once in a night, maybe a couple times during the night. But what's going on? For people who don't know, what does it take for you to get what you need for that 2-minute break that they go to you for the story?
Well, you got to be there. I mean, that's the no. I mean, I know a lot of reporters said they like to do things on the phone, but you got to be there. You have to be there. You have to know the situation. You have to ask a lot of questions, and it takes time. There are times when you might be spending 10, 11 hours on the scene to get your report. That happens not all the time, but it does happen a lot. I mean, you don't just show up somewhere and 5 minutes later you get the story, unless it's a breaking story. But there's a lot of grind, a lot of questions, and sometimes a lot of standing around. 5 minutes can become an hour can become 2 hours, and sometimes it's just a question about waiting someone, or just don't go away. I mean, I'll always remember there was a story. A young lady was killed in South Africa, and I wanted to interview her parents. I wanted to get the story, and they told me that they would talk to me. And the husband kept saying, well, tomorrow. And the situation was such, if I waited until the next day, the story wouldn't have the same impact. And so rather than talk to the husband, I talked to the wife. And the wife gave me the interview. But a lot of times you have to become a pest to get what you want. But you have to do it politely. Sometimes you come across as a bully, but it's you have to have the ability to accept rejection and people telling you no in this business, and then you have to find a way around that. Otherwise, you're cooked. If I had given up on stories after someone had told me no, there's no way you're going to get it, or you got to drive 20 miles to get this, you got to go 15 miles up the road to get that, I wouldn't have gotten the stories done. And I think that's what makes the difference between a reporter that sticks around a long time and one that doesn't.
The title of your book is very intriguing. It's A Great Life If You Don't Weaken: Family, Faith, and 48 Years on Television. Explain to me a little bit about what that title means. What is if a great light if you don't weaken?
My father always had expressions that he made. It's a great life if you don't weaken. The only thing money can't buy is happiness. The only thing that money can't buy is good health. And he used to say that all the time when we were kids. And so when I wrote the book, I wanted to have a catchy title of some kind. And I'll always remember my dad say, look, it's a great life if you don't weaken. And basically, because in life, you're going to have a lot of disappointments. Things aren't going to go your way. And the survivors are the guys that don't give up. I mean, I always tell people, and my father would tell me the same thing. The easiest thing in the world today is to be a quitter. I mean, anybody can quit. It's no big deal. It doesn't take any effort. The people that are successful are those that don't take no for an answer and don't quit. So I remember my dad to this day. He passed away 10 years ago at the age of 89. And he used to say, it's a great life, but don't weaken. And so when I wanted to put that in the book, I found out that was from a record that was very famous right after World War II. Here, I thought my dad was like a famous philosopher, made up this catchphrase. He took it out of a song, and I had to change it a little bit because of the rules and regulations of book titles. And so I added family, faith, and 48 years on television. We got away with it, but like I said, I wrote the book with the sole intention of letting people know what it was like to grow up in Southern California in the 50s with parents who did everything to make sure that you were prepared for what was out there. My dad was one of the smartest people I ever knew. Never went to college, but boy, he was street smart, really street smart. My mother was the sweetest, most compassionate person that I ever knew. And that stuck. And I think the reason that I had any success at all is because of the way I was brought up. And that's what I wanted the book to show. And I think that's what it did.
The title mentions faith. How did faith fit into your career and obviously family life?
Well, I'm a Catholic. My wife was Lutheran, and we raised our kids Lutheran. And I've always been a very strong believer in God and in prayer. And I learned very early in life that not all prayers are answered. But if you live a good life, I really believe if you live a good life, the good Lord will bless you. I mean, I'm not a religious zealot. I don't wear my religion on my sleeve, but I'm not ashamed to admit that I believe in God, that I pray, and I think faith plays a big role. I really believe that if you don't have any faith at all, you're missing something, and it'll change you as a person. And I think the compassion that my mom and dad used to show, and they weren't the kind, they didn't go to church every Sunday. I mean, my mom, my mom didn't pray the rosary every night, or whenever there was something that we thought that was a dire situation, my mom would say a little prayer, say a little prayer. The Catholic education certainly was very helpful in that. So I think if more people believed in something, I don't care if you want to believe in a God or whatever, but you believe in a supreme being of some kind, I think you're better off for it.
What do you want people to take away from the book? I know it talks about your life, your upbringing, and some of your career, and maybe some of the difficulties you've been through. But what is the ultimate takeaway you're hoping people will get from that?
Well, as I said before, the idea that the number one fact is the way I was raised, and it had everything to do with the success I have. That I worked very hard, that it really didn't come easy, but that I had a goal in mind. And you can apply that to anything in life. You have a goal in mind. Too many people today, they have an idea what they want to do, and then they change their mind. I don't know how many people you run into. Oh my God, my kid's in his 5th year of college, 6th year of college, 7th year of college. Well, why? Well, because he changed his majors. You have to know what you want to do. You really do. And I was very lucky that that's what I did. I wanted to be a reporter. I wanted to be on television, and that's what I did. Everything I worked in life was geared toward that. I also believe in a very strong family life. I had a marvelous wife. I had great kids. I spent time with them. As hard as I worked, I always made time to go to my daughter's recitals, to go to my son's games. I coach my boy. I love coaching. I love sports. That was from my dad. And I threw it all into this book, covered some great stories, had a wonderful time, had fun. And I want people to realize that in life, if you can't laugh at yourself, and if you can't pick yourself up and say, hey, made a mistake, here we go, let's get on with it, let's make it better this time, you're going to have a sad life. So I put all of that in with some nice little stories that I thought would be good. It's not a rehash of everything I covered. It's not one of these stories where I said, well, I covered this, I covered that, although that's part of the book. but the behind the scenes, what happened beforehand, what happened afterward, different things like that, and just have a good outlook on things, but don't ever take yourself too seriously that you can't look and have a laugh. I mean, uh, life is too short, and go out and enjoy it. And I think that's what I want people to take from my book. I've lived a full life, done what I wanted to do, still got a lot of ideas and plans that I'd like to do, but I've had a great run.
Where can we find the book?
Amazon. It's on Amazon right now, and it's real. Dave Lopez. It's a Great Life If You Don't Weaken. It's also on audio, and I do a Facebook
Which I
report
understand you narrate.
Yeah, I did. Yeah. I had a lot of fun doing that. It was fun, and I also do a Facebook report once a week, and I can easily be reached on that. And I just if you feel like I got a couple of appearances coming up. I don't have them off the top of my head, but the book came out almost 5 years ago. And people are still asking, what have you. My little grandson, who's going to be 12, he tells me, he says, Grandpa, you used to be famous. People used to know who you were, but you're not famous anymore since you retired, unless you're trying to sell a book.
Well, I'll tell you what, we appreciate the time. Like I said, you've been on my television for many, many years. It's weird how some of our paths, at least with similar people, had crossed over the years. And I appreciate you sharing. You seem like you're in a good place after some difficult times. And I hope life treats you well with whatever you pursue.
Well, thank you. That's very nice of you. I'm healthy. I feel good. I have a wonderful young wife in my life. I got 4 beautiful grandkids. My kids are getting older. I enjoy them, and they're all nearby. And we're still in touch with the family, so it's wonderful. And I tell you one thing about about things, keeping things in perspective. One time I was coming out of a liquor store somewhere. I forgot where it was, and there was a gentleman sitting on the porch there, and he looks at me and he goes, "Hey, you're Lopez, aren't you?" I go, "Yeah." "You're on Channel 2 and Channel 9, aren't you?" I go, "Yeah." So, well, yeah, thanks. Yeah, thank you for watching. And he goes, No. I get to turn you off twice.
Puts it in perspective, huh?
Yeah, puts it all in perspective.
Hey, award-winning journalist Dave Lopez, an amazing career here in Los Angeles, and now enjoying retirement. We'll put up a link for your book. Thanks so much for spending time with us.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. It was a lot of fun, and you take care.
And again, a big thanks to Dave Lopez for being our guest. You can reach him at Dave Lopez Media, and we will have a link for his book down below in the description. Again, we thank you for tuning in to Dave Wants to Know. Make sure that you hit subscribe and like. It helps us bring you great shows like the one today. Have a great day, and we'll see you next time around.